is Linda, and this is our podcast today that I'm really excited about introducing Justin to you. Um, I've known Justin for a long time, but in recent years got to know him a lot better, and especially in recent months as we were working on his book, and I kind of helped him a little bit with the book, and I'm really
Fun.
excited about having him on today. So Justin
Excited.
Bortz is from my hometown of Reading, Pennsylvania. That's where I first met him, and we've become reacquainted over the years, and working on this book has we've become much closer friends. So
Yes.
Justin, I wanted to start by maybe having you tell us a little bit about your life, your background, and what in your background prompted you to write this book.
Hmm. Good question. Um, well, my mother was very Catholic, charismatic, and very religious. And I'm the youngest of 10 and the seventh son,
Oh.
whatever it's worth.
I didn't know that.
Yeah, yeah. Um, and so I would tag along and I go to prayer meetings and I go to healings and I go to charismatic masses. And so in ninth grade, when they asked us what we wanted to be, I said a priest was my answer. And I guess that's where my head was at right then and there, but it didn't last long. But I got involved with my friends. It was really nice because most of my really close friends, we were all pretty religious, Christian religious, and we got involved with this group called Young Life. Have you ever heard of Young Life?
Hmm.
Yeah. Well, there was this really awesome guy named R.D. Wilkes, and he was the Young Life leader for our area, the Governor Mifflin area, suburb of Reading, area called Shillington. And R.D. was great. I mean, he was a great guy, and I ended up going to their summer camp called Saranac in the Adirondack Mountains, and it was a week long, and it was so well done, and it was so much fun, and they had like the best skits and the best, just top shelf stuff, and the speakers were really good, so it was very inspiring. And I came out of there, and I ended up going back the following year and working at the camp for a month. First on work crew, working in the kitchen, scrubbing pots and pans all day and all night. And then I went back on as work staff, and I was the outdoor maintenance guy. I did all the lawns, and so I came out of that, and I right out of high school, I started going to Young Life training things to potentially become a Young Life leader. At that time, I was also working as a jeweler, bench jeweler, but I was having a rough time with that because the guys I worked with all kind of were rough on me. I was this young, naive kid, and they were all like ex-alcoholics and divorced people, whatever. They just were like at a different place. But I was gonna go. I was gonna become a Young Life leader, and I was also considering going to Steubenville University, Franciscan University, and that was probably going to lead to something. I'm not sure what. Um, but like last minute, two things happened. One, I met a girl, right? And I got a girlfriend, local girl. Two, the Mike Mumma, the owner of the goldsmithing shop where I was working, called me up and begged me to come back with a raised pay and an assurance that the guys weren't going to pick on me anymore. So so I went back and I didn't go to the Franciscan and Young Life. There was this moment, this kind of pivotal moment where it was me and a group of maybe 15 other Young Life leaders, and we were all having this meeting, and this idea came up that if you're not a Christian, you're going to hell, right? And as crazy and ludicrous as that sounds coming out of my mouth, I argued with everybody in the room. It was me against everybody that was utter nonsense, that a God of love would be like that. If you were raised Jewish or you were raised Muslim or you were raised Buddhist or Hindu or you're on a desert island and there's no religion, whatever. It's just nonsense. But that was kind of the end of my Young Life aspirations. So And what also happened, something around there was I got married to Maggie, and we were 3 months on our way to having a baby when we got married. Um, but the baby, Lauren, was born September 22nd, but she had spinal meningitis and she died 4 days later. It's very sad. Two things happened there. One, it launched me into therapy, and two, it kind of gave me a little bit of grit, like in my character. Like I started like looking at things with a little bit more grit and objectivity. I stepped outside and I started seeing what I thought were really like holes in the common Christian belief systems. So I started looking at other religions. I remember reading a book on Taoism, Tao Te Ching. It's a famous one. And I think I read autobiography of a yogi, or at least half of it. And also read a book by Dan Millman called The Way of the Peaceful Warrior, which really had a big impact on me. But going back, when I was in junior high, the show Kung Fu came on TV with David Carradine, and it was it was the most amazing thing I had ever seen or encountered. Watching David Carradine play this character of Kwai Chang Caine, this Buddhist Shaolin Temple monk who was just such a beautiful person. It was like a show that was showing what a human being could really be like. And that was always in the back of my mind as I was kind of like becoming disappointed with Christianity and sort of starting to look other places. Buddhism certainly seemed to be the religion that seemed to make the most sense. So when you ask me what inspired me to write this book, that's sort of what I'm getting to. So in 1986, I was doing this intensive therapy called The Process with a PhD named Ron Weiss. And he was a guy from Brooklyn. He had his Brooklyn accent, right? It was really cool. I remember when I was looking for a therapist, I called this 1-800 number, right? I was living in Seattle with Maggie, and I called this 1-800 number, and I came back one day from work, and there was like 5 messages on my machine from different therapists, right? And the one was this Ron Weiss guy with this Brooklyn accent. And I'm like, you know what? I like this guy. I like this accent. I like this, so I started going to see Ron Weiss. And his thing was the process. And it was like very, very deep introspection of like how your mother affected you, how your father affected you, the sadness, the anger, the understanding of their life and how they came to be who they were. And I wrote a book about this thick. It was a lot of homework and it was a lot of work, but it was really good. It took me 8 months to finish the process. But in the middle of the process, I'm just going to take a drink here. In the middle of the process, there was this one night where I was there and I was kind of deep into the religious programming, the aspects of my upbringing that were complicating my mind in a way where I couldn't think things out myself. Like you asked me a question like, what do you think about abortion? The answer was already there, right? It was like programmed into me. And that was the way a lot of things were. So I had to do a lot of work to kind of clean all that out so I could get to a place where I was just kind of simple minded and just could like, oh, you asked me a question about something, I can think about it and answer the question. Um, so I said to Ron Weiss one night, I said, Ron, I never believed in the whole heaven and hell thing. I said, so childish. If you're a bad boy, you go to heaven. If you're a good boy, you go to, if you're a bad boy, you go to hell. A good boy, you go to heaven. What about the child that's like beaten and abused and has this horrible life and then goes and like kills some people, ends up in jail, dies? Are you telling me he's going to hell? No. God has much more understanding and compassion than that, right? But Ron's response to me was completely like off subject in a way. He said, "I know somebody who's in heaven and alive. And I'm like, what? Because this is coming from this really intelligent, bright person. And I said, tell me more. So he handed me a booklet, and what it was an introduction to a book that this teacher, who he says is completely enlightened, had written. And the teacher's name at that time was the Heart Master Da John. And it was an introduction to the Dawn Horse Testament, which is a book that Da John had written, and it was about that thick. I didn't read the book at that time. I just read this little pamphlet when I got home that night. And I couldn't believe how quickly it got to the real crux, like the center of it all, like the problem itself, and it was basically this on a cellular level, what Adi Da called the avoidance of relationship, right? The avoidance of relationship is the crux of it all suffering, the ego, and everything. So I thought, wow, this stuff is really pure, like really. So I went to a bookstore called the Dawn Horse Bookstore in Seattle, and it was all about this teacher, and I could, watch the videos, and so I remained interested in this teacher, and also Ron invited me to his birthday party, and he told me that at this birthday party was going to be two longtime disciples of this spiritual teacher. And I was like, whoa, wow. Like I'm going to be in the company of somebody like Peter or, Paul or Matthew or it's one of the apostles. So I get to this party and I'm introduced to this guy named Bill. And Bill gives me this sweet hug, like an amazing hug. Like he, it was just really a beautiful hug. And I got a moment during this party to talk to him, and I said, so tell me what it's like to be in the company of this heart master. And he said, okay. He goes, well, the first time, and the reason I say this is because there's so much echo of this in the book with John Franklin, the stories I heard. So Bill tells me that, okay, so he says he's in this room and they're all waiting for the arrival of the teacher. And they're like chanting and some people are meditating and he said then somebody somewhere outside there was a conch, somebody blew a conch shell, that right? Wow. Indicating that the divine person, the spiritual teacher is on his way. So he said that made his hair stand up in the back of his neck. And then the teacher arrived. And he said, as he watched him, he could see that as he walked to his place and sat down, he could see that this man was really alive, like really conscious, like he had a conscious glow about him. And then he said, he sat down and he said he did the most amazing thing. And I said, what? He said, he became completely naked. And I get choked up just thinking about it. He said that, I said, you mean he became completely naked? And he goes, no, no. He said he became like a child, completely surrendered to us. And he said it broke his heart. And he knew what God was, and it was absolutely heartbreaking. And he began sobbing, crying, and he cried for quite a while. It was that moving. And so I heard stories like that. I also heard another story that blew me away, which is like very echoed in the story of where John is speaking. It's kind of the climax of the first part of the book, where it's called the Crescent Moon of the Heart, right? You know that one. So the Crescent Moon of the Heart It's this night where John tells his disciples that he's going through something of a metamorphosis and that he's going to be extremely bright. Like there's just going to be this incredible energy flowing out of his body while he's going through this change. And so that's an echo of a story that's called the Day of the Heart, where Adi Da told his disciples, his followers, this very same thing. And it was also September of 1979. It was September 9th. So on this occasion, 700 people came, just like in the story of the Crescent Moon of the Heart, and a lot of people that were just being asked by a friend. They weren't really that religious. Whatever. So, but they said that when the Heart Master took the stage, he was wearing all white in this white hat, and he said the people said that there was love bliss energy just flowing out of his body, and it like hit the people in the audience like a wave, and everybody started crying because it was that beautiful and just heartbreaking and loving. And so in the story with John Franklin, it's the same story. It's the same thing where this woman is interviewed after she is at the event of the Crescent Moon of the Heart. And I think it'd be kind of nice to read that little excerpt, actually, if I can find it quickly. Um, and let's see. So, oh, okay, here it is. Here's the Moon of the Heart. All right. Okay. So I just say one woman who was later interviewed about her experience reported, I really did not know what to expect. I am not a religious person at all. My friend invited me. When John walked onto the stage, he looked incredibly happy and peaceful. Then I didn't know if my eyes were playing tricks on me, but it looked like something was flowing out of his body. I wiped my eyes and blinked a few times, then it hit me. At first, it just felt like a warm breeze, but then I felt a burning in my heart, and I began to cry very hard. I could not contain it. I looked around and I saw that I was not alone. Many people were sobbing, and John, he was like a child. Her voice began to tremble. Completely vulnerable and surrendered. She strained to hold back the tears. It was the most significant moment of my life. God is not this separate, almighty, all powerful, judgmental being. God is pure intimacy, absolute surrender, and unthinkably sweet and beautiful. So, so in my own personal journey, I continued reading his books, and eventually his name, as he kind of metamorphosized in his own journey of enlightenment, his name settled at the name Avatar Adi Da Samraj. And so when I was about, oh geez, I think I was in my early 40s, 30s. I was in my late 30s. It was 1968. It was January 29th of 1968. I was going through this period in my life where it seemed like nothing could make me happy. It was like everything ran out. Like all the things that made me happy weren't doing it anymore. So I started asking and praying that I would have an experience that would ignite my spiritual journey, right? So I go home this night, January 29th. It's raining, it's cold, it's miserable, and it's a Thursday night, and I'm feeling really out of sorts. My son Houston, he's on the couch watching TV. He's like 7 or 8, and I had this I had this marijuana, right? And I've always been like a lightweight with the use of it. Like I would take one hit and I would use it to create jewelry designs and things, and it was very good. It was very good with that purpose. So I came home this night and I decided I was going to take not just one hit, but I was going to take two. And I knew that this stuff was pretty powerful. So somebody called it the Christmas weed. That was the name of it. So I take two hits of this very strong marijuana. And instead of having it make me feel better, it took my anxiety and it magnified it a lot, right? So I go walking into my kitchen and I try and like I'm trying to do things to kind of tell myself that the universe is trustable. Like I went in the kitchen and I said, okay, I believe that the universe is made of love and that I'm made of love. And whatever it is I'm feeling right now, it's just a disturbance. It's not real. And I just started breathing and whatever. So, but here's the crazy, amazing part that really changed my life. I walked over to this picture, the one that Ron Weiss had given me, and I had it pinned up on like a board in the kitchen. And I walked up to this picture and I just held my hands up like this and I just said, if you would show me your love, I would really appreciate it because I'm really hurting right now. And just like in the story with Atiye, where he's looking at this tree and then suddenly he's in another dimension, that happened to me. I was suddenly looking at somebody standing next to a tree, maybe about 15, 20 yards away. Then they were right in front of me. And the way I described it was it was the face of the most beautiful child. That was how the best thing I could describe it. The head was tilted like it was a mirror, almost like it was a mirror of me in a way. And it was so unthinkably beautiful that my heart just opened wide open. And I fell to my knees in like the shock of the energy that was suddenly happening because my heart was wide open and because I was seeing this being that was the highest beauty, the highest love, and it was vibrating at the speed of light too. It was like light itself, you know? But it was so beautiful, so loving, you know? And I came out of that and I reached out to the closest community of devotees, which was down in Bethesda. And I went on to study for 2 years and I came under vow in February of 2000. But what I noticed, I have the strong inclination to be a missionary, you know? I'm the kind of guy that's like really good at inspiring people and good at talking to people and like I can talk to somebody, I can talk to five different people and I can explain the same thing five different ways because I have this kind of a relational quality about me, right? I can even tell if I'm playing music in a car, I can tell if the person next to me likes the music or not before they even say anything.
Wow.
You know, it's kind of like that. Yeah. So, so in my efforts to tell people enthusiastically about this vision I had, and I wrote this little booklet called The Full Blossoming Human, where I had all these theories, and I was like, I was fascinated with the relationship of plants and the sun, right? I had this idea, and I believe that it's true, that our relationship with God can be just like the photosynthetic relationship of plants and flowers and the sun. Like it's just like that,
Wow.
right? But we have to come out of the ground, right? We have to get up out of the ground, right? We can't just stay under the ground like a seed. So I kind of wrote this book and all these theories and everything. But I was trying to tell people about the spiritual teacher because I was like, oh my God, you won't believe who this guy is. And but everybody went blank,
Mm.
blank. And I tried for like a number of years, and it was like maybe one person that like got it and was like interested. So there was this thought in the back of my mind early on, like, what if I wrote a book about a character that's like Avatar Adi Da Samraj, but it's a mythical character, but a book that can build a bridge from where people tend to be to the place where they don't go blank-eyed when I'm trying to tell them about the divine person, right? They don't go blank because they've read the book and they've made some synaptic connectors that connect them, right? So they can get it, they can receive it, they can understand it. So I know it's a very long answer, but that was probably the main stimulus of why I wrote the book. Um, but I also wrote the book, on a grander scale in a way because I love good movies and I feel like Hollywood has run out of good ideas and they're just grinding away the same ideas over and over again. And they're just getting more gory and more horrible and more thoughtlessly heartless. So I wrote this book in hope that also, and I wrote it like a book, right, Linda? It kind of
Right.
reads like a movie. I wrote it like as if
Yes.
you were watching a movie.
Yeah, so as I was reading it, I thought it's almost like a screenplay more than a book
Yeah.
because
Uh-huh.
it, but I tend to read like that where I can see things happening and almost anything I
Yeah.
read. But
Yeah.
you mentioned Ataye, and just to give us a little bit of background on the character of John Franklin,
Yes.
can you talk a little bit about John Franklin's birth? It wasn't in a stable or a
Yeah.
cave, it was in a hospital in New York City.
Yes.
The two people that really impressed me out of this book, I think, were June and
And
Ataye, and because they
yes.
were
Yes.
present at this birth. So,
Mm-hmm.
can you tell us a little bit about the birth of John Franklin and the
Oh
miracles
yeah.
that happened?
Oh, yeah, I'd love to. I'd love to. It's wonderful. It's really a wonderful part of the book. Um, so so June Horowitz is this sensitive Jewish girl. It starts with her being like about 10 years old, or just before 10 years old. And it just describes, she had this relationship that her family was very poor. And she had this relationship with this goose that she named Sweetie, right? And she told her mom that she could understand what the animals were thinking, right? So she was psychic already. And when the parents cooked Sweetie because there was no more food, it was incredibly traumatizing to her. And she went further in withdrawal. So it's her 10th birthday, and she has this cousin named Julia. And Julia is a daredevil. We've all had those, right? Relations or cousins or whatever. They're doing things that are like fringy, and we're like, oh, I don't know if we should be doing that. So Julia's like that. And so Julia has her and June walking across this plank, like beam in the barn that they have that's 25 feet up. And halfway across, June's, you know, shoes that are falling apart break and she falls and lands right on her head. And she immediately starts rising out of her body and and she rises up into the light, into the divine light. And I think you wrote the one part where she's like, this isn't that judgmental, bearded jerk that I've been hearing about in school. That was your part. You wrote that, and people love that. People really love that. So so she rises up and she realizes that this light is a person, and she's like, this person is God, and it's like unthinkably loving and benevolent and full of humor, right? And I should almost probably read that little part where what the being of light says to June, because it's kind of important. The being of light spoke to her in a voice full of tenderness and love. My sweet and beautiful June, we are going to shake things up down there. He laughed and she laughed with him. Then he goes on, the world is a whirlpool of ignorance, fear, and pain. The darkness has spoken its blinding bewilderment. It is time for the light to respond. I am the golden Christ. I am the Rashira Buddha. I am the gracious one. I am John. With those final words, June felt herself being pulled back towards her body, and she saw her dad performing mouth to mouth resuscitation. And then she became this confident, amazing psychic. And, she ends up living in Manhattan as a young woman and doing psychic readings for wealthy people. And she's doing very well for herself. So this date comes around. It's November 9th, 1939. And she's doing a reading for a woman named Helen who has relatives over in Poland and is obviously concerned with good reason. So she starts going into her like trance like state of psychic and meditation, and suddenly she is all in this horrifying situation where she's on a train full of people being transported to a concentration camp, and they're begging and crying for help and for God, and it's just has to be the most horrible thing in the whole universe, right? And she's there, and she's like, suddenly she forgets she's this psychic, and she's like freaking out, like, my God, what's happening here? But just suddenly, boom! I said, like changing the channel on a TV. She's in a totally different situation. Now she's in a room full of scientists, and these scientists are all clinging there with champagne because they have figured it out. They figured out how to split an atom and create a monstrous explosion that can kill thousands and thousands of people instantly. Then, boom, the channel changes again. Now she's in a hospital room and she's witnessing the birth of a child. And as she is entering this room, before her focus becomes clear, she starts experiencing the same light that she experienced when she went out of her body. And instantly her mind goes to, as soon as it comes into focus and it's a child, she's like, oh my God, is this John? Is this John? And there is this glorious light filling the room. At one point, I say it's like the light of the Ghost of Christmas Present when Scrooge goes into that room and he opens the door and the light is so bright, and he's the Ghost of Christmas Present there laughing, and there's this big feast. And I said it was kind of like that, and that it was as real as love itself, this light. So this baby is born, and the father is down on his knees because the natural state of reverence is just upon him, and the doctor is holding this baby up, and he's down on his knees, and there's this light coming from this child, right? And so then June looks to her side, and she sees there's this young boy there next to her, also witnessing the same scene. And so she comes back into her body, right? And then the book goes to this other situation in the other side of the world in South Africa with these Umbuti tree people. I cite the book The Human Cycle by Colin Turnbull because I read his book about these people, and these people are regarded as being like some of the most enlightened tribal people on the planet. And um, it goes to this boy named Atiye, and he has just the day before, he is going through his rites of passage. He's 14 years old, and now he's to become a man, right? And he goes through this rites of passage experience where he has to crawl through this tunnel, and the tunnel gets very tight, and he's like, "Oh my God, am I stuck?" But he breaks through and he makes it out, and the leader of the tribe has his legs spread, as he comes through, and then after that, his head is shaved and he's painted white, and they burn all of his childish whatever's toys, clothes, whatever. It's burned, and all the women are singing this hauntingly beautiful music about the death of the end of innocence, and he gets circumcised. That's the last part of the ritual, that he becomes circumcised. So he goes through all this, right? And now he just feels magnificent, right? He feels magnificent. Now he's a man. He's done it. It's over. And he goes to sleep, and he goes into this deep sleep. And in the middle of the night, I say it's like a warm breeze on his soul, wakes him up. And he gets up and he goes outside, and he instinctively goes to this tree that's like revered as a holy tree where a lot of rituals take place. And it's kind of like what we call our sacred oak in Oli. We have a tree like that. It's like 900 years old. So he goes to this tree and he's just looking at this tree, and then all of a sudden, snap, he's in another dimension, and he's in this hospital room, and he is also witnessing the birth of this child. And he said, at one point, he says, I should read it because it's really good. What he says about his experience. And Linda, you helped me out with a lot of these parts. So you deserve a ton of credit. Okay, so let's see here. Okay, we're getting there. Initiates, New York. Okay, north around something like it. Okay, so all right. He quickly concluded that it was a hospital room, and he was witnessing the birth of a child. There was a beautiful light engulfing the room, and the light made him feel holy and pure. He breathed it in deep, and it fed his soul in a way he had never experienced before. He had a tacit knowledge that this child was a savior, someone even more sacred than the most holy men or women in his tribe. So he also notices June is next to him witnessing the same birth. And then he comes back, and he's back in his bed, and it was like he never left his bed. So then we go to the actual birth itself. Well, no, actually, okay, some other really good stuff. So these two characters named Sam and Joe, and they work for the the New Jersey Port Authority, and their job is to keep an eye on the New York Harbor, right? Where it, like, I guess it's where it borders on New York City or Manhattan or something. So their job is to watch, make sure everything's okay and whatever. So all of a sudden, one of them goes, "Hey, what in the Sam Hill is that?" Right? And the other one's like, and gives the other one these binoculars, the other guy, Joe, and he's looking, he's like, "What the heck?" Here, three large sperm whales swim into the New York Harbor, right? Contingent with this birth, and they stay for 7 days. And it affects both of their lives. They both have like this kind of epiphany, kind of an awakening. Then it goes to this character named Pat Borders. Pat owns a pet store. And the weird thing that happened in the pet store at the same time as these whales swam in on November 9th was all the animals were unusually quiet. Normally, the birds are and the dog are everything's making a bunch of noise. That's the world she lives in. But it's quiet. Nobody was making a peep, and the cats were purring big time, right? She's like, "What is going on here?" And it made her, and she knew about what they called the miracle of the whales, right? So all of this gave her this religious experience, And it made her think of St. Francis because her mom was a St. Francis freak. And up until this point, she thought her mom was bananas, as I put it, right? She had statues and pictures and everything St. Francis. But suddenly, Pat was like, I want to read a story about St. Francis. Like, she was just like drawn to it. So she opens this book that her mom gave her and she starts reading this story about this wolf. Now, the story, there is an actual story of St. Francis and a wolf, but I took creative license and I sort of made my own version of it. So St. Francis was on a walkabout, and this is the story that Pat is reading. And he comes to this village, and like nobody's out. The children aren't playing, women aren't doing anything, but he sees this one woman is real hectically hanging up her clothes and stuff. And he approaches her and he's like, what's going on here? Where is everybody on this beautiful day? And she's like, oh my God, are you the one they call Francis? And he's like, yes. And like she cries because it's like her prayers are answered. She was praying for a miracle because this wolf was terrorizing her village and killing people. She's like this demon possessed wolf. So he's like, St. Francis is like, where is this wolf? Point the way. So he goes off, and about 30 minutes later, he's crunching through the woods and he hears this. And this wolf comes from behind a tree and he's snarling at him. And St. Francis is just looking at this wolf with like a curious look, like, hmm, right? Not the look of terror, like the look of, hmm. And he says to the wolf, what's wrong? So suddenly the wolf goes from being very vicious to being very like sad and communicates to Francis. I put it as words, but it's like happening in the mind. He's communicating with this animal, and this animal tells St. Francis that he's the runt of the litter, and because somebody in that village killed one of their young ones, they all moved out, but there was not enough food for him. So he was stuck to stay back near this very village that cursed him and his life, right? So he was demon possessed. But Francis walked up to the wolf, put his hand on his head, delivered all this beautiful, godly, loving energy to this wolf, and then said, I'm alone. You're alone. Why don't you come with me? So he and the wolf walk back to this village where people walk out and they're like, what in the name of Sam Hill happened is going on here? And he's like, be not afraid. Be not afraid. This wolf is sorry for what it's done. And it is a change. It's changed now. And the woman that he met when he first got there explains to everybody, this is Francis of Assisi. And as she's explaining this to this town, the wolf comes up to her like a tame dog, and she begins petting this wolf that just killed people in the village. St. Francis performed this amazing miracle, right? So Pat finishes this story. She sits the book down and she begins to sob. She begins to cry. It's so touching. And whenever I read the story myself, I actually cry at that part because you just get it. You just get it. So after all these experiences of June and Atiye and Sam and Joe and Pat, then it goes to the actual birth, right? And it says, John Darlington Franklin, born 909 on this day, and that Mercy Hospital didn't know what was about to happen, when he was born. And he was born, and all this beautiful light fills the room, and just like the experience of June and Atiye watching all these things happen. And then I switch to another aspect of what's going on. I say that on this day at Mercy Hospital, there was 30 young people that had diphtheria. A lot of them had diphtheria. A few of them were on their last legs with leukemia, and there was actually a pastor who was there to read the last rites to these parents. So you can just imagine how sad this is. And there's also a girl who had been bitten by a dog and had these facial lacerations. So the parents are in this waiting room and the children are all in these other rooms when suddenly they hear this gasp happen in the birthing room. And some of them are like, uh-oh, something went wrong. But then I say, then this light, which defied like normal principles of doors and walls, just came through and hit them. And the adults that were there grabbed their hearts, and the children, I said, received it much more gracefully. But what happened then, this light filled this hospital ward and healed. Like I said, I get touched by my own story. Healed all of the children. Leukemia patients, the diphtheria, the girl with lacerations, everyone was completely healed because of this birth of John Franklin. And I also say that the doctors said, don't say anything about this miracle, because if you do, everybody's going to become knocking on the Franklin's door and they're not going to have a peaceful day in their early parenthood life. So that's the whole story of John Franklin's birth and everything going on around it.
It's an amazing story. I mean, I was so privileged to be a part of this, and I have about a zillion more questions. So I think if it's okay with you, Justin, I would love to kind of end with these birth stories, but then come back on a second part two, because
Totally, I can't wait.
the whole book is about seeing God as not so much, as you said, June saw God as not that scary old person in the sky that's going to punish her, but a God of humor and a God of music. So I would love to have
A lot
you
of music, a lot
second
about music.
time and
Yeah,
we can talk about that. But in the meantime, we will give people all the link to purchase your book. And I hope you'll all go out and buy it, because as you can see, this is an unusual book. It's something that you probably won't read again. And it's The Seventh Avatar by Justin Bortz. And that's a great
and Linda Lizakowski is played a prominent coaching role as writing coach and editor.
Yeah, thank you. And it was a pleasure being part of that. And my affinity to St. Francis, Justin is very well aware of. In fact, I'm now
Yeah,
working on my book on Franciscan spirituality, which Justin's going to contribute to, whether he knows it or not.
I'd be happy to. I don't know how, but yes, I'm here.
But we'll look forward to seeing you in part two. And I want to thank you for
Yeah,
sharing all that you've shared with us. You've
thank you.
practically given us the key to the book, but I think people should read the whole book because there's so much more in it. So
Yes.
thank you, Justin, and we'll
Thank
see
you,
you
Linda.
in part two.
Yep.